Hello! It is now right at the end of December 2024, right before New Year and into 2025. So I'm doing my very last book review for the year, and it is for this book. This is Cause Unknown by Edward Dowd, and he is talking about the epidemic of sudden deaths in 2021 and 2022. So I actually think this is a really sort of relevant book for a new year, because at New Year, you know, we look back and we reflect and we think about how we want to go forward. So I think this book is really, really relevant. I mean, in some ways, I know there's a lot of people who want to think that this is something that's happened now. You know, it's 2020 and 2021 and then 2022. And let's, you know, move forward. But I think it's really, really important that before we can move forward, we need to recognise where we've been, what's happened. And there are some things that you shouldn't forget and that you should keep in mind as you move forward. And this book is definitely really important in that. So I wanted to read this book for a number of reasons. So I was very interested in all the events of 2020. I was one of those people who was, you know, labelled and out, you know, outcast and treated really horribly. And then obviously as we moved into 2021 and 2022, it was, you know, like living in this bizarre parallel universe where one minute we'd been obsessed with deaths, however, you know, flimsy the link between the cause and the death, and now suddenly we were doing everything in our power to ignore the massive elephant in the room that was so clearly trampling and causing awful, not just lots of problems, but, you know, it was bizarre, because it was this situation where I really felt that people had got to a point that they were actually doing everything they could to make sure they just didn't see the elephant in the room. And it's a very strange thing to live through, obviously. So this book is talking about that. Then I'm sure anybody who's interested in this area has heard of Edward Dowd, because he's a really, really impressive speaker. He's not from any kind of crazy or flimsy background. He is, so he's actually from stock market background and banking. And so he is oh my God, let's get this right, stock market investor. And he's worked for people like BlackRock and made them a lot of money. So, I mean, you know, he's not like some outsider. And so in his job, he's used to sort of analysing trends and trying to sort of predict how things are going to go in the future. And so what he saw happening at this point in history was like a serious trend in deaths, particularly of young people, young healthy people, and them not really being attributed clear reasons for it. Okay, so that was the sort of trend that he was noticing and investigating, and using his background in sort of stock market trading to analyse the figures and see if he could work out what was going on. Okay, so this book is a really, really good book. It's really beautifully laid out and made. It really, really focuses on the people who need to be remembered through all of this, and that is the people who have died, particularly the young and healthy people who have lost their lives in this situation. And I think it handles the whole thing very sensitively, whilst also being really assertive that we need to be honest about the reasons for this and to try and ensure that it's not continuing. Okay, I think that's a really, really important thing, to try and say, you know, we need to be honest, this thing has happened and now it needs to stop. Okay, so I was just going to talk briefly through the contents. So he talks about sort of the healthy young athletes that died, and I think everyone must remember all the headlines and things at the time of athletes having heart attacks and deaths as they were actually playing sport, and how disturbing that was, and how it then even became sort of dismissed as well, it's not really as much as it was. And he shows in this book how it was a massive increase in the number of people. And that's really good. He really is good at using, you know, sort of official statistics and things, not overusing them, but just to I mean, it's so proved. So he talks about, you know, is it true? He talks about the number of people dying unexpectedly in their sleep. It talks about children and the number of children being affected by the things. And he also talks about the disability and injury caused. So it's really, really important. This book, I think one of the good things about this book as well is that it doesn't go into too much deep explanation. The emphasis is really on the loss of life and that impact of that, which should be enough and just needs to not be forgotten. Okay, so there's a lot in the book of sort of I'm crap at doing this, trying to line things up, but sort of showing, you know, the headlines, because they sort of speak for themselves, and there's so many of them. It's something that, you know, the fact that it has been ignored in the way it has is almost, you know, a kind of real feat of mental gymnastics. Okay, so many people, so many young people, and these are just the people who are in the headlines. You know, it's not everybody. Okay, famous people who are, you know, were just in local papers, all sorts of people, so many people. It's really, really good. And then, yeah, the sort of other adverse events as well as deaths. Okay, I think it's really important to keep those things in mind, the people. It is a really sad issue that shouldn't be ignored. He also has some good charts to just demonstrate some statistics. Nice, easy to see charts that it's really difficult to not see the trend, especially when you see that repeatedly over and over in different countries. I thought this book was really lovely as well because it's so straight to the point. I think you could just, if you saw this book just sitting around in someone's house and you just picked it up and just looked at it for a really short period of time, this message is going to get through to you loud and clear. So it's really good for that. It's not trying to take you on some deep dive into all the facts and figures and let's analyse this. It's done really succinctly, really clearly, and really effectively. I thought it was a brilliant book. It is a sad issue that it is still being ignored, and I'm really, you know, I think that obviously I think this is unfortunately something that we're going to need to beat the drum about a little bit, because unfortunately it's still being pushed. You know, that's the most sad thing about it, is that it is still being pushed, and even you know, the scope widened in many ways, and you can see that right from the national level and even down locally to your sort of local pharmacy advertisings and things, and people queuing up to get, you know, their things. It's very sad. You also see the effect of it in your sort of in the world around you. People still getting ill and still getting quite ferocious illnesses that come on very quickly and take people's lives. That's still happening a lot. So, talks through some of the flaws. I think it is really important to talk about it. Yeah. One of the things I was always really surprised about with the injection is that when they brought it out and they talked about how it worked, I remember at the time thinking, okay, so how do they make sure it stays in one place in the body? And how do they make sure it goes to the right place? And how do they make sure that it only, you know, reproduces itself a certain amount, enough to be effective, but not enough to, I don't know, do what? What could it do? And if they're using that kind of technology that's so tiny and minuscule, it can get through cell walls and stuff, how do they stop that getting through cell walls they don't want it to get through? But it's so many questions, and I have no scientific background. And then you see things play out, and it's like, these were literally the questions that they should have been asking, that they should have been working out the answers to. And how can I think of these questions when this isn't my area, but they just didn't think of them? Okay, right. So, talks about, yeah. So I think, and calls really that it just needs to be stopped now. I think that's the most important thing that needs to come from it. Okay, so that was that book. I really loved this book. It was brilliant. Not only it was very emotional as well reading it, and you know, of course it should be. I think you'd be a hard person not to feel emotional at the number of young, healthy people that have been, you know, tragic event that in many ways is still going on. Because I think until it's acknowledged, it's going to keep going on. You know, it has to be acknowledged for us to be able to move forward. So yeah, it was really, really good. I also think it's just a really good book. It's really just well put together and well organised to get this message across, as I said, really clearly and really straightforwardly without getting bogged down in the weeds of anything. Although the facts are there, it's just really sort of hard hitting and straight to the point. And also done with definitely the right amount of sensitivity. I think he's very aware of that, of not wanting to be, you know, insensitive to people. So it's really, really good. Thought it was brilliant. So that's that book. And yeah, and it is New Year, so I think it is really important to look back at where we've been and learn from the past, learn from what's happened, so that we can move forward in the best direction. Right, so the book I'm reading now, something completely different, is The 6 Wives of Henry VIII by Alison Weir. And yeah, it's definitely a bit of light relief and sort of easy reading after that. Not that this was like hard or, you know, really dragged you down or anything, because I think it was sort of, because there was not tons and tons of text in it, it's a lot of just focusing on the stories and the main points and facts. Anyway, but it's lovely to actually get deep into a book about the Tudors. I love the Tudors. Okay, and I'll hopefully have a review for that soon. Okay, thank you.